Welcome back to American Agenda. Alec Baldwin, all the talk on social media after the actor's controversial interview with George Stephanopoulos.
Baldwin claiming he didn't pull the trigger of the gun that killed cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Sarah Williamson has more.
Social media has exploded since actor Alec Baldwin's exclusive interview with ABC News anchor George Stephanopoulos aired last night to discuss the tragic shooting on the set of the film Rust in October. People are upset that Baldwin appeared to be shifting the blame, saying that he's not responsible.
Someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
Now, some people are even suggesting that he was blaming the victim, Halyna Hutchins. He claims that Hutchins directed him where to point the gun so that she could get the best shot.
I said to her, now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. And I said, do you want to see that? And she said, yes. So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
Now, these aren't the only moments in the interview that shocked the audience and had Twitter blowing up. There is a lot of chatter from the left and the right about the fact that Baldwin was saying he never pulled the trigger and raising eyebrows as to why his lawyers allowed him to do the interview in the first place, right before a trial.
Thank you, Sarah. Of course, some people think that he's out there trying to change the narrative.
Yeah.
From
well, he was given the opportunity. That's a whole nother question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is it possible that he did, in fact, didn't pull the trigger? How could that be?
Yeah,
or in just pulling the hammer back,
right?
Could it fire?
Yeah, and so we're going to talk with someone who can give us an answer to that. The owner of Gun for Hire and capitalist marksman Anthony Colandro. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So answer that question for us. How is this possible?
So I have a
gun
very similar here to what Alec Baldwin used. First, I'm going to check to make sure it's empty. All 6 cylinders are in fact empty. So he's saying he didn't pull the trigger. And on a single action gun, you can't pull the trigger and have it fire. What he did was he had his finger on the trigger and he cocked the hammer as such. And when he let go, it fired. So he didn't in fact pull the trigger. He was squeezing the trigger the entire time and it fired, when in fact he is 100% at fault for that. That is how a single action
just to make clear,
works.
Anthony, he's claiming, he made it sound like maybe his finger was not on the trigger. So I think some people are wondering, if you were to pull back the hammer without your finger on the trigger, could you tell us what would happen?
It stays cocked back.
Okay. You
have to put your finger in the trigger for it to fire. Or if your finger is in the trigger, when you cock it past the 2 detents, 1, 2, it will go forward and fire. That's the only way that can happen. So he had his finger depressed, cocked it, and released it and fired it. This is what we have with Hollywood. They want to play with guns without getting education. They want to ban guns and disparage us law-abiding citizens and firearms instructors, but yet they don't even know how to operate the tool that they're pointing at someone. He broke the 3 basic safety rules of firearms. He did not check the gun. Anybody with half a brain would have looked down the cylinder visually to make sure that it was empty before he pointed it at someone. He did not do any of that. Finger on a trigger, assumed it was unloaded, and pointed it in an unsafe direction. This is all on him. He's just playing this narrative that he's playing the victim, yet he murdered someone and injured someone else.
Have you ever done any work with actors on different sets? And is this the type of thing that you teach them? And would you be aware if this is something that, I mean, Alec Baldwin's been around for a long time, he's done a lot of movies, that he would know to do?
We do classes for the Screen Actors Union out of Manhattan. I'm right outside Manhattan. And I've been a gun wrangler on numerous movie sets and have taught many of the Hollywood elite how to handle guns. I've been on sets where there's shotguns, like Ink Master with Dave Navarro, and various other movies with Sopranos cast characters, etc. And the gun wrangler handles the guns. There are no live ammunition at all on set. The gun wrangler or gun safety officer controls all of the firearms and the props and the dummy rounds and everything the entire time. This was a mistake from the top to the bottom. But again, it still boils down to the last person to hold that firearm and point it at somebody. And whether he had the trigger down and he cocked the hammer or whatever he's saying he did, he pointed that gun at that person, so he is liable.
Okay, let's go through it just one more time because we know how this is going to play out. All of us can understand if his finger was on the trigger and he pulled it back that it could fire. The scenario may be that he claims his finger was not on the trigger, and I just wanted to ask you if you could once again show us the different stages you could pull back the hammer and what would happen as a result to the hammer and whether there's any chance that it goes forward without the trigger.
Sure. So he's claiming he pulled the hammer back. She said here. He said no. He said here. She said no. She said here. Okay. It will not go forward. It will not go forward. The only way it goes forward is if you do this, squeezing the trigger, or if your finger is depressing the trigger and you cock the hammer, first detent, second detent. I'm holding it now. As soon as I let go, and I'm thinking after watching his interview that his finger was in. When you have a newbie shooter and you hand them a firearm, the first thing they do is put their finger in the trigger guard.
Yeah.
First thing that always happens. You have to teach people to index their finger and keep it pointed in a safe direction like that.
So even without squeezing the trigger, if he just had his finger in the trigger, it was possible.
Correct.
Okay.
Just like that. That's what's happening here.
All right. Well, we're going to see this play out, and we wanted to get an expert like yourself, Anthony, to educate us, to let us see whether this argument held any water.
Yeah. All right.
And in your opinion, it does not.
Does not hold any water. False narrative.
All right. Anthony Colandro, New Jersey gun for hire. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Be safe.
Very insightful.
Yeah.